Now, a parliamentary motion written by the independent MP, of course, former Reform MP Rupert Lowe, calling for the mass deportations of all illegal immigrants, has now received the backing of 13 MPs. Now, of those politicians, 10 of them are Conservatives, Independents and the Democratic Unionist Party and traditional Unionist voices. And to discuss, is this the direction of travel we should be going down in British politics, or actually is it a bit of a bad look? I'm joined now in the studio by GB News' political editor Chris Hope and the chairman of the Great British PAC, Ben Habib. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Let's start with you, if I could. Chris, so this is a notion that I think until quite recently has been a bit spicy for most of the electorate. But I wonder if the public mood is shifting. There's been some polling done recently by Find Out Why, saying actually 85% of the electorate now do back the notion of the deportation of illegal immigrants who've committed crimes on British soil. It might seem quite right-wing, but actually, is it not that way anymore?
Well, in the week after we saw those huge numbers coming over on small boats on Saturday, I'm sure those numbers might swell. They aren't all criminals. There could be some in there who are fleeing oppression for human rights reasons. But there is a concern about why people can stay here. The government says it does take back people who are here, who have criminal records and commit crimes here. And indeed, that's a policy being pursued by both Labour and the Tory party. But yes, I can see why that's happening. Look at these numbers here. They're supporting Rupert Lowe's policy. Lots of senior Tories, Gavin Williamson, former Chief Whip, Andrew Rosendale, who's on the front bench of the Tory party, Lewis Cocking, a rather ambitious and quite interesting new Tory MP. They are, I think, trying to push their leader, Kevin Badenoch, towards the position of pulling out of the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights. And if that happens, this can happen. So that's the order, the sequential order of making this policy happen. But it's fascinating that is happening. For the Tories' point of view, they are pursuing a policy of reviewing lawfare, and into that they're putting. I know you're frowning because lawfare isn't the same as ECHR, but they say that is their ECHR.
It's just tinkering. If we learn anything with Brexit, you can't tinker.
Well, that's why Robert Jenrick, for example, is saying ECHR withdrawal now, and that would lead to what you're describing there. But this is I think the conversation is changing increasingly to why can't this happen?
Rupert Lowe himself has stated there's very, very little chance of this motion ever impacting policy, certainly in this government. But the fact of the matter is, we are having the conversation. Ben Habib, let's bring you in on this now. What say you about the notion of mass deportations? This notion is for all illegal immigrants, not just criminals.
Yeah, so let's just be clear. There are 1.2 million people in this country who enter the country, estimated 1.2 million people in this country who enter the country illegally. So they are here without the right to stay here. They haven't successfully applied for asylum and been granted it. And therefore, I draw no distinction, and I think it's fundamental flaw to classify those who've entered the country illegally in any different way to those who've entered illegally and then committed a subsequent crime. They're all criminals because they entered the country illegally. They weren't allowed to get through our border. We may have been incredibly weak and taken the knee at the point of our territorial waters and let them in, but they shouldn't be here. And any policy which doesn't have at its heart the detention and then deportation of people who've entered this country illegally and don't have a right to stay here, any policy that doesn't have that at its heart is a failure before it even gets going, because it sends out a message that actually if you get through the net, if you get onto British soil, we won't deport you. And that is a fundamentally mistaken message to be putting out to the world.
Where do you get your 1.2 million from? That's extraordinary.
It is extraordinary. It is. You'll have to look. You can fact check me.
I can't find it anywhere. I mean, how do you get the Home Office here? Say they have no idea how many are here.
I have seen that figure.
Migration Watch, to be fair, put that figure out there. It is widely touted as a figure. And also, when you look at national insurance numbers, and also I think Thames Water did some research in the amount of water used. So that could be a figure. It's not. They're illegal. You know, you can never be exact, but I do think there is some evidence.
Of course, they're here legally. They're here legally, so you can't have an exact number. But any principle that puts imagery and optics over and above and to the detriment, therefore, of the security of the nation is a fundamentally flawed principle. These people have entered the country illegally. They are here illegally. They haven't successfully applied for asylum. They should therefore be deported. There's no room for them in the United Kingdom. And whatever the imagery is of detaining 1 million people over a period of time, however difficult it is, however expensive it is, the cost is minuscule compared to allowing the continued assault of our country.
OK, gentlemen, thank you for your input. Let's bring a fresh voice now for a counterpoint. I'm joined by the founder of the Sanctuary Foundation, Krish Kandiah. Krish, a pleasure to have your company. How does it make you feel when you hear the notions that there could be mass deportations, the rounding up of people who are here illegally, entered illegally, and getting them on flights back to from whence they came? Very Trumpian, very out there. How does it make you feel?
Hi, Martin. Always a pleasure to see you. I guess it goes against the history that I see of our great nation. We've got an incredible tradition of showing hospitality to people in need. You go back to the Second World War, the Kinder Transport, 10,000 Jewish children came to the UK. Some of their documentation was a little bit iffy, and we look back now and we say people like Nicholas Winton were heroes because we needed to get these children out of harm's way. Or look at the Ukraine. We are celebrating this incredible Mission Impossible style attack where they took out so many aeroplanes, but it's incredibly dangerous to live in Ukraine. And so we as a country opened a safe and legal route.
Yeah, but Krish, the point you're making there is that those people aren't illegal immigrants. There are people who become in via legalised immigration schemes. We had that with Ukraine. Right. We had that with the Jews when they were fleeing Nazi Germany. That's a false equivalence, if I may say so, sir. It's not the same as people queuing up on beaches in Calais and piling over now who aren't invited. So it's not the same thing.
Well, the reason that we didn't see any Ukrainians get on a small boat and try to come to the UK and seek asylum is because we gave them the right to be able to claim asylum before they left their homes. So they had a safe and legal way to get here. Now, that's not true for very many people. It's true for Ukrainians. It's true for a few Afghans. But beyond that, hardly anyone has the ability to claim asylum without turning up on our shores. So we need a safe and legal route. We also need to smash the gangs and stop the evil people traffickers. But there are no safe and legal routes for people to get here unless they're from Ukraine or Afghanistan. And so this idea that we're just going to pull up the drawbridge and say we're full, I think that's a problem. I think it's also a contradiction because I've been listening to Nigel Farage say there aren't enough people in our country. He's been trying to encourage us to have more children because he doesn't think our population is big enough. So which is it? Are we full or do we want more children born here? Which one? You can't have both.
Well, I think they're, with respect, different points. I think encouraging people who are taxpayers and contribute on British soil to have more children is completely different to saying it's OK to allow dinghies to rock up and have 2,000 on a sunny Saturday. I think they're quite different things. But look, we have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us. That's the founder of the Sanctuary Foundation, Krish Kandiah. Always a pleasure. Back to the studio. Quick reaction there from you, Ben Habib.
Well, you missed the point. The point is this. These people who've entered the country illegally have not successfully applied for asylum. They're here illegally. They have not been granted the right to remain. Those are the people that are at the centre of the policy that I'm advocating for the mass deportation of illegal migrants. Yeah. I mean, it's a whole load, and that's the problem when you interview people like Krish. They conflate a whole load of issues, and they somehow manage to get the war in Ukraine into they use that as a form to justify people who are already safe in France, who have no gun held to their head. They're not being bombed. They're in France. They're safe, and they make that journey, that dangerous journey across the Channel, willingly. And they come here and they fail to get asylum. So why should they remain?
Ben, before you go, you're here backing a policy of Rupert Lowe. What's happened to your political party you're launching? You were back here in April talking to a party to the right of a Reform UK.
There's no such thing as left or right. let's just get this absolutely straight. There are those who believe in the governance of this country through supranational institutions, international law, defeating habitually democracy in the country. And then there are those of us who want to put the country first. And I am one of those who wants to put this country first. A proud, independent, sovereign, prosperous United Kingdom. That's what we stand for. There are very, very few of us. And it's surprising to me, by the way, that none of the Reform UK MPs have backed Rupert's bill. I know there's a bit of bad blood, to put it mildly, between Rupert and Reform, but the policy is absolutely right for Reform, and they should be backing it. My political party has now a draft constitution. It has a body of people which is coalescing around it, and we've got a few more bits and pieces to put in place, and then we will be launching.
OK, let's talk about another thing you're here to talk about today, Ben Habib. That is, you have a legal case brewing to help the Chagossians. I had Misty Mandarin on the show last night, of course, a Chagossian who you're working with. Tell us about your initiative.
So I was horrified by the whole prospect of giving Chagos away. And then I was doubly horrified, as I think anyone would be if they read the actual treaty, which opens with a whole load of mea culpa on the behalf of the United Kingdom, as if we're one of the worst countries ever that existed. You know, it's just a list of things that we've gone wrong, including recognising our wrongs of the past. And but in amongst the various declarations made by the British government and the recitals to that agreement, it says that they support the welfare of the Chagossians. Now, the Chagossians were famously removed from the islands in 1968 through to 1973 without any say in their removal. And now, supposedly in the support of their welfare, the government has given away the islands without consulting them, which is a fundamental breach, in my view, of their human rights. And I think Misty Mandarin would agree, as would most Chagossians who were forcibly removed from the islands. And our legal case stands fundamentally on that principle, that actually it undermines the human rights of these people who were removed from the islands and have not been consulted on who should be in control of their islands. They've been handed over to Mauritius, which has had no historic claim to these islands. It was never part of Mauritius. The British Indian overseas territories, including Mauritius, were all taken by the British Empire at the same time.
And Ben, over Northern Ireland, you constitutionally took on the government over the sovereignty of that territory. You learnt a lot from that.
I did.
How are you planning to use the same expertise here? Do you think you'll have a chance of causing a defeat or at least huge embarrassment for the British government over Chagos?
Well, the Northern Ireland Protocol challenge was one that actually politically we won. We got the Supreme Court ruling in which the Supreme Court declared that the Acts of Union, the very fundamental Acts of Union 1800 that created the United Kingdom, have been in significant part set aside by the Northern Ireland Protocol. So we're sitting here today, gentlemen, without the United Kingdom actually being in existence in the way that you and I believe it to exist. We have a border down the Irish Sea. And the Supreme Court ruled that even though you're right, Ben, the Acts of Union have been set aside in that fundamental way, we're going to call it legal because that's what the Withdrawal Agreement Act legislated for. And so we have an uphill struggle with Chagos. If we can't protect part of the United Kingdom, it's going to be even more challenging to protect part of our territories. But that doesn't mean you don't do it.
So the government would argue, wouldn't they, that Northern Ireland, yes, is a border in a sense down the Irish Sea, but they're now both in the UK and EU. And I'm watching Northern Ireland. If they get hit in a tariffs war with the US, that is a problem for Northern Ireland. But they're also in both jurisdictions. Isn't that a good thing for them?
No, it's not a good thing. What's effectively happened is that Northern Ireland has got the worst of all worlds. Its biggest trading partner is Great Britain, and we've put a border between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The trade that it has with the Republic of Ireland is frankly a rounding error. It's about 25 billion a year with Great Britain and 5 billion a year with the Republic of Ireland. And we've put the border in the worst possible place. And we've done it without any further support for Northern Ireland. You'd also be aware, Chris, that the tax rate in Northern Ireland for companies is twice what it is in the Republic.
And back to Chagos, you're going to chuck 10 grand of your own money into this legal part. You're putting your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, I always have, actually. With the new political party, I'll be putting my money where my mouth is.
How much?
I'll do whatever is necessary, Chris, to give it the best chance of success. Unlike most politicians who get into politics to make money, I'm doing the opposite.
OK, what about the Chagos thing? So how do people get involved in this process?
So there's a crowdfunding exercise that's taking place. I'm very pleased to say we've more or less raised all the money we need. But if you're up for fighting for British national interest, please do go to the crowdfunding, at least pledge your support, if not provide money.
And that's the Great British Pack. Chairman there, Ben Habib in the studio. Thank you for joining us. Always a pleasure. And, of course, thank you, Chris Hope.